In this video, we'll be talking about Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd. The album is celebrating its 55th anniversary and was released on August 5th, 1967. I will be talking about the first time I listened to this album, then I'll give some background on it, and I'll talk about the songs. So the first time I discovered this album was when I was a teenager. I was getting into metal music. I knew about Pink Floyd from the albums like Dark Side and The Wall, but I never listened to their early stuff. One day I'm watching Headbangers Ball on MTV and they played Astronomy Domini by Voivod, and they announced it was a cover of a Pink Floyd song. So I think afterwards I went to the record store and I had the intention of buying the Voivod album, but for some reason I decided to go to the Pink Floyd section, and instead I found this CD and I bought it. It's the Piper of the Gates of Dawn. So I used to listen to this all the time. It was just very different. It was kind of like the Beatles, but much more psychedelic. And therefore, this has always been like one of my favorite albums from the band. If I ever rank Pink Floyd, this one is gonna come up very high for me. So let me give you some background on the band. So this is the first album. So they began in the mid '60s, playing live shows at the UFO Club in London. Now, at this time, the band consisted of Syd Barrett on lead vocals and guitar. He wrote all the songs except 3 of them, and I'll talk about that later. Then we have Roger Waters on bass and vocals, Nick Mason on drums, and Richard Wright, keyboards and vocals. So prior to the release of the album, they released a few singles, and that kind of gave them some recognition, and those singles were Arnold Lane and See Emily Play. So the album was recorded at EMI Studios in London's Abbey Road, and it was recorded from February to May 1967. It was produced by Norman Smith. At this time, the band was known to play long improvisational songs live, but the album also has these short pop songs written by Syd Barrett, and they were just very psychedelic. They used a lot of reverb and echo on this album, and they used the recording techniques that were available at the time, such as automatic double tracking. Syd Barrett's abuse of LSD, this caused a lot of mental health issues, and for that reason he had to leave the group the year later. And the album title was derived from chapter 7 of Kenneth Graham's 1908 children's novel The Wind in the Willows, which was actually a favorite book of Syd Barrett. So in 1973, Piper of the Gates of Dawn was re-released, and it was packaged with the band's second album, A Saucerful of Secrets. And they released this in the form of, they called it A Nice Pair. And that was because a lot of the band was getting a lot more recognition due to Dark Side of the Moon from 1973. So on this album, we have 2 instrumentals. We have Interstellar Overdrive and Pow R Tok H. So Pow R Tok H, this one has some weird vocal sounds and a jazzy keyboard solo. This one is a good song. The drum beat is very interesting. It's mostly a piano melody at first, but they add some haunting sound effects and psychedelic organ sounds. They play around with the left and right channels, and this gives the song very cool feel if you're listening to it with headphones. And there's also a cool bass guitar solo towards the end as well. Then there's Interstellar Overdrive. That's an instrumental. It's close to 10 minutes long. It's a pretty heavy song for 60s standards, and real good example of space rock, something the band UFO did later on their first 2 albums. And this song is just like a space ride. There's so many futuristic sounds, takes a lot of psychedelic twists and turns. Song has all these quiet parts and loud parts, and it's, like I said, it's a long song. They incorporate these creepy organs in the background, these slightly distorted guitar riffs, and these riffs kind of rise and fall and just kind of create these very creative soundscapes. The middle of the song seems like a freeform jazz session, but the main melody comes back at the end. And then at the end of the song, they kind of toggle the left and right channels back and forth. So if you're kind of listening with headphones, you kind of feel it going back and forth between your head. So I guess that was their intention, but it is kind of crazy how that worked out. Then Roger Waters wrote one song, Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk. So he did the vocals on this. This is like a typical pop song from the 60s. It has a lot of psychedelic sounds. There's some cool guitar playing, some odd percussion, and some pretty good. There's actually some like guitar shredding. There's some like a cool solo. And the song is just very raw, kind of like an early form of noise rock with some similarities to a band like The Doors. The rest of the songs were written by Syd Barrett. A few of them were collaborative efforts, such as the aforementioned instrumentals. But let me talk about the rest of the songs. So I'll talk about Astronomy Domini in more detail now. I mentioned this in the beginning. The song is very trippy. It has this sonic drum beat and these descending guitar riffs. They kind of make you feel you're on a space trip. It's a good headphone song. You can hear the different sound effects and like the astronauts talking to form in the song, but it's just very trippy and psychedelic. Lucifer Sam is a cool song. The intro reminds me of like a James Bond theme song. It definitely has a spy movie feel to it. The song has a 60s rock vibe, but they mix in these sound effects and it makes the song feel very cool. You hear a lot of different instruments used, but the song is structured as a typical pop song. There are a lot of different sounds mixed into the song. Matilda Mother, this is a slow song with fantasy lyrics and a lot of different vocal styles. They use some falsetto vocals. This one sounds like they're telling a story or some type of fairy tale. They have an organ solo, kind of similar to something you would hear on an album by The Doors, and lots of sound effects in the background. The end of the song reminded me of something you would hear on like a later day Beatles album where they just changed the melody a bit. Then there's Flaming. This one has like this fantasy-oriented feel, talking about unicorns and other stuff. Song that something maybe like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles, where they're just describing all these crazy, like trippy scenarios. And they use a lot of like psychedelic sounds. There's some odd percussion and sound effects, and there's some cool keyboard melodies in the song. Then The Gnome. It's a fun song, a story about a gnome. It's a folk rock song with a nice melody. It has a very 60s rock sound. They do some cool stuff with echoes on the vocals, and it's a pretty cool song. Chapter 24. This one reminded me of a psychedelic Beatles song. It has some Middle Eastern melodies and piano sounds. The song is very laid back and relaxing and has a very dreamy atmosphere, and there are lots of sounds mixed into the song. And the song also has like, it doesn't have any drums, it's just like the instruments and the vocals, so that's pretty cool. Then The Scarecrow. This starts out with a cool percussion and a light keyboard melody. It's another song that has this folk rock sound with cool melodies. And this song tells a story, and they're adding like all these different instruments throughout the song. So it's pretty cool. And the last song is The Bike. And it's a fun song. You know, like they have this line where it says, you're the type of girl that fits in with my world. It's just a really cool melody. Reminds me a little of the Beatles again. Just a fun song. You like to sing along with it. At the end of the song, it kind of takes this weird turn, and they have these sound effects with like, almost like these like horror movie sound effects with like a clock, and it sounds like dragging chains. And then some type of, I guess they're either like ducks or geese like making their noises, and that closes out the album. I think it reminded me a little of like the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, when they closed the album with the weird sound effects. So that's all I'm going to say about this. This is just one of my favorite Pink Floyd albums. It's one that I have been listening to for a long time. I really like it. It's just very trippy, psychedelic. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it. And that's it. The weekend's coming up, so new reviews by Soulfly and Amon Amarth. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one.